My belief is that one of the most regretful things we did as a society over the past 20 years was indiscriminately embracing digital media.
The thing is, this is how things typically go with new tech and emerging industries.
He's right. You don't know what you don't know.
Which is why we're calling all churches to quit social media.
Well, not exactly, but we do need to establish some universal guidelines for how Christians should behave online.
So for your consideration, these are church rules for digital hygiene.
Well, hey there, and welcome to the Pro Church Tools Show. We're here to help you and your church navigate the biggest communication shift in 500 years. I'm Brady Shearer, your host. I'm joined as always by my co-host. We call him the Portobello Priest. It's Alexander Mills.
Hello.
You can watch full-length episodes of the show every week, every Wednesday. Ever heard of it? On YouTube. And of course, listen wherever you get your podcasts, Spotify, Apple. The place I want to start today is by really addressing and responding to the groundswell of questions and comments that we've begun getting really for the first time in the past, I'd say 18 months or so, related to the harms of digital media and social media. And the New York Times actually had a really great article on this, and it was kind of shocking reading what they were saying about social media. The article was written by a retired United States Supreme Court justice. Here are a few of the excerpts. Quote, "Barely 10 years since it first made its appearance, it has already conquered an important position, undoubtedly a fascinating amusement. It intoxicates and bewilders the senses, costs the lives of many persons, a terrible engine of destruction." I'm kind of just like taking bits and pieces and putting them all together. "The cold and heartless mechanism furnishes a poor substitute for the real world."
Yikes.
So pretty familiar critiques of social, it intoxicates the senses, it's a danger to society, we have to get back to the real world. Except those New York Times quotes are not about social media, Portobello Priest. They are about automobiles.
You really got us.
That article's not from recent, it's from 1908.
Wow.
Though it is from a retired United States Supreme Court
so it's
justice.
not entirely false news.
And it was run in the New York Times. But the reason that I wanted to include that is because for many years, I have heard social and digital media, I don't know if you've heard this, likened to things like smoking, things like diet soda.
Sure.
And the reason for those things being, it's because, there was a time when an article came out, or the medical society, community society, the great medical society, the community of medicine was like, hey, maybe we should stop smoking, or maybe we should stop drinking so much soda. And people are like, hey, we're going to come to a point with social where we realize that we have been, consuming this way too much. The difference is that I think, personally, it's much easier to abstain from something like soda, to abstain from something like smoking, but kind of removing yourself from digital media altogether, much more challenging, which is why I prefer to liken it to transportation, to automobiles, because it's not exactly easy to just be like, I'm going to opt out. I'm going to become like some of the Amish and or Mennonites that live in our Niagara region. I'm going to opt out of combustible and or electric engines altogether, and I'm going to only use horse-drawn carriage.
Yeah, like in this meta-modern period we're living in, it is similar to the Amish community in the sense that if you were to withdraw from social or the internet, like this interconnective network of networks, if you were to withdraw from being connected digitally, you would have to live such an alternative version of modern life that it would look something like, an Amish life where you are restricted to work wherever you live, and you can only talk to whoever you live with, which is a previous version of human society and human living. But we are living in an altogether different age, and not only does social media and these devices and our connectedness, introduce new societal plagues, if you will, but it affords us incredible opportunity. I wouldn't have this. We're on a podcast, for goodness sakes. I work on the internet for 8 hours a day. I go home and I communicate with people on the internet beyond my 8 hours a day. Like it is the fabric of, it is part of the fabric of this modern life. And so to withdraw from it completely, we see it all the time. People are like, you see your friends post on Instagram, like, you know what? I'm out of here. Like, it's too much. I can't handle it. And like within 14 days, they're back. They're posting again. It's like, well, that hiatus was not as long as you kind of alluded to it probably being, but it's really hard to withdraw entirely. And in most circumstances, I'm not sure that's the best path forward for individuals, or for the context of our listenership, for Christians or for churches. And so that's the question before us today, I guess, is like, how do we engage? How do we interact with the devices, the internet, the connectivity in a way that maybe promotes health? Is it possible?
Is it possible? That's the unanswerable question, I think, because the hypothetical could be posed towards the automobile industry, and I have posed that hypothetical before. Has transportation, in the way that we think of it today, been a net positive or a net negative in society over the past 150 years or 120 years? And I don't know how one would even go about answering that question, but if we imagine a world without that, like think about the critiques of Western architecture or Western, city building, city planning. It's like, oh, everything is built around roads and highways and parking. And you visit some of the older cities that were built before automobiles, and you're like, wow, it's just like, it's made for people. Like there are places to walk and there are places to see nature, and not everything is built around cars. You think about just how distant we are from each other in community and living locally, because now we're all, spread out because we all have to commute to different places, and maybe we work in a different place than we live, and maybe we're not as connected to family anymore because we moved to different places. Not to mention the pollution and the the damage that's been done to the God-given creation that we have been entrusted to steward with these types of things. Of course, the flip side, we know all the benefits of transportation. And so we could have this conversation about would it be better or would it be not? But no one has that conversation about automobiles because they are 100 years past that conversation happening. They did in 1908. They were running the articles and the op-eds in the New York Times, and this was a conversation. Nowadays, it's not a conversation at all because it's this constant. And so we get these emails and DMs from pastors and leaders being like, is it responsible for our church to be involved? Is it responsible for me as a pastor to be involved? Because they see the harms and they see the problems. What happens? You describe this. Someone says, you know what? I'm off this platform. Then they return. Why? I think that's a symptom of us really just not having any cultural code for engaging these platforms in a healthy way. The way I've always described it is that we have indiscriminately embraced digital media since its inception 15-ish, 20-ish years ago. And it started off really innocent, right? Like adults in 2006 didn't really have to think about MySpace. That was something we thought about. And it was damaging for us because maybe you weren't number one on a friend's top 8, but they were they were number one on yours, and that was causing some tension. Maybe the honesty box on the first version of Facebook was saying like, "Hey, you're not that cute." That was challenging to hear.
Wow,
I never got a message like that, so it doesn't. No, I got the message. You're cute, but not hot.
Oh, that's tough.
My whole life.
Yeah.
So now I just get tattoos in anger to solve that trauma.
It's an overcorrection.
Yeah. But people return because that is their best effort at trying to correct the error that we have all engaged in. But it's not a good solution because it comes at this great cost that is not really manageable. Or here's another version of that. I cannot tell you how many conversations I've had with pastors, and they've been like, yeah, our church needs to engage in social, but can I tell you something? I really don't like social myself. And then I dig deeper. I'm like, oh, okay, what do you mean? TikTok, that's not for me. I'm like, okay. Instagram, I'm on a bit, but really for my friends and family. I'm like, great, what about YouTube? I love YouTube. What about Reddit? Oh yeah, I'm on Reddit. Okay, so you do like social media. You just are defining it slightly differently.
Right.
Every person almost always has some type of version of social media that they like, but they might just not consider it one of the major platforms. Oh, yeah, I'm not really on social media, but I really like Twitch, or I'm really onto Discord. All of these things are different expressions of social media, and we've talked about the stratification of social as different platforms are kind of carving out their unique spaces within the social media landscape, where before it was every major platform only, and now there are different ones with different specialties, and they don't have everybody. Shouts to Threads. Threads is holding on. Buy a thread. Sorry, it's holding on. Maybe Twitter doesn't even work anymore in my browser. I'll just refresh it. And I'll just get a big X. I'm like, can I log into you? I'll log out, log back in. Elon's like, no.
I just got a new phone. I had the hardest time logging into the X app on my phone. It just it would not let me under any circumstances. I finally got in. But as you were talking about, we've been talking about automobiles and drawing this parallel between the transportation industry and now this communication shift we're going through that is resulting in affording us a new measure of connectivity in a way that transportation does as well. Like prior to the motor vehicle, or certainly the airplane, it was unachievable to travel certain distances, at least reasonably. But now, my wife and I can fly to California for the weekend, and there's a certain measure of connectivity that you can get there, and traveling to family or distances or whatever, similar to the way these phones and the internet and these mediums connect us. And there have been small groups of people, we've alluded to it, the Amish, who have pushed back against the transportation, the motor vehicle. But that doesn't hinder the technology from moving forward. The rest of the world continues to move forward with the technology. Small groups of people resist it, and within their communities, they can do that effectively. But the rest of the world continues to move. And so the same is true here. It is, of course, your own prerogative, your individually or in your community, to push back against these social medias and mediums, the internet, the connectivity, but the rest of the world will continue to move forward. We will not go backwards as far as our connectedness via the internet goes. And so we stand at this point in our individual lives and in our collective lives, just asking the question, like, how do we move forward and how do we do it in health? Because removing yourself from this digital world comes at this cost of disconnectedness from, real-time events going on in the world. In some cases, your local community. Like, we have friends who are trying to discern when to give phones to their kids, and they're allowing their kids to have phones later than their other friends. And these kids are like just feeling so disconnected from school life, from friend life, because they're all on Snapchat and they're not able to communicate that way. And so it comes at a real cost of being disconnected from your community in a sense. And so how are we going to go forward? How are we going to go forward in health as well?
We're going to get to our kind of church rules for digital hygiene. I think that the big temptation is to do the pendulum swing thing, right? It's like, wow, we embraced social indiscriminately. Now we need to discriminate against social media at all costs. And like, neither ends of that extreme, neither binary, dogma in all forms is almost always ineffective. It's almost always the simplest solution, and in its simplicity is ignorant, truly. I want to discuss, though, why I am still bullish on social while acknowledging the dangers and harms. And really, it comes down to acknowledging what churches are doing well on social. I published a carousel on Instagram a few weeks ago with the headline, apparently because all I can do now is be cheeky. That wasn't from the New York Times. So the cover on this carousel was, why I no longer recommend churches use social media. 6 reasons. That's the voice. You have to read it in. Reason 1. Social media might expose your pastor's secret double life. And then I have this quote from a pastor. I was at work last week, and I'm a bivocational pastor, and someone that I work with about once a month came up to me and they said, "Are you a minister? You showed up on my TikTok feed." This was a smaller church in North Carolina, a couple hundred people. And they told me, they're like, "We just want people to know our church is here." And they start using social intentionally for the first time, really. And this guy that he works with, bivocational pastor, he's worked with this guy for, not no length of time, had no idea what his job was. Wow. I'm just imagining what that guy's like. Oh, there's that guy who I go work with. Okay, he's a pastor. Reason number 2, people might connect with your church on social media before coming in person. This is from a creative director of a church of, mid-sized church, like 800. There was a lady that just recently started going to our church. When I met her, she said to me, "I've been watching online and engaging with your social accounts, and this is what drove me to finally come in person, the fact that I was able to follow you online for so long." Reason number 3, social media might reveal your pastor's true identity. Man, I'm the worst. You know what, though? This post had the most likes.
That's the thing, it works.
You're all the worst.
Yes.
See, we're all the worst. See what social media has done to us. Quote, my wife came home from this is from another pastor. My wife came home from the chiropractor a few weeks ago saying the doctor recognized her last name and asked if I was a pastor. He's all over my Instagram feed right now. The chiropractor said, crack! So that's a tangent.
Those TikToks are the funniest. Have you seen those?
Okay, so just lie and just enjoy. And then, boom! Oh, man. So that's a tangible example of someone hearing the good news online. A person who does not attend our church or follow us online, but lives in our local area. I think this is something that people are missing right now on social, is that these discovery algorithms now have this local component that didn't exist prior. And now, because of TikTok's influence, all the other social platforms are copying it. And now all of these platforms have these local discovery components. And for churches as local organizations, right? Like we talk about the church advantage, which is if there are 3 steps to publishing content on social: ideation, creation, publishing. Churches always get to skip that first step. We don't have to come up with ideas because our senior leadership are coming up with those ideas every single week in the rhythms of preaching. We can take that, skip the idea phase, go straight to creation and publishing. The counterpoint to that would be, yeah, but like we're churches, we're local organizations. So like, what do I care if I create a piece of content and then Brady sees it in another country or a couple states over? But now, again, in the favor of the church, there's this local component. I can't tell you how many times I'm on TikTok and I'm like, oh yeah, I love that creator. And then like they post again.
From Toronto.
Yeah. You know, this dude, you seen this guy?
No.
You haven't seen?
No.
Wow. I am doing
I'll see it now.
I'm doing the hand signals, but it's this Indian guy and he's from Toronto and he sits in his car and he self-identifies as a zesty man, as I do myself. Shouts to all my sassy zesty boys out there. And his first viral video was where he said, you know, I didn't break up with you because I didn't like you. It's the way you act. The way you act. And
I've not seen this.
it became this viral sensation.
Wow.
And then he finds out he's a Toronto man.
Yeah, that's not a coincidence. That's by design.
Yeah.
We've seen that.
Although, I mean, counterpoint, why didn't you see it then?
I don't know.
Okay, reason number 4. Social media might introduce your church to new people. Yuck.
You really are the worst.
I am the worst. See what social media has done to my writing? 60% of our church's new visitors now come from social media. That's lead pastor of Mosaic Dubai, Jeremy Cole, who we had on a previous episode of the show. Reason number 5, social media might share the good news with millions of people. Quote, that one sermon clip was seen almost 20 million times on Instagram alone. End quote. That's from Crystal Ennis, creative director at One Church. We did a podcast episode with her. And then finally, reason number 6, social media might be your church plant's number 1 driver of growth. Angry face emoji. Quote, more than half of our new members have come from social media in the past few years. That's Trey Van Camp, lead pastor, Passion Creek Church. We had him on a recent episode of the show as well. Basically, all of these reasons for why I am still bullish on social, because full stop, I still believe the best way for your church to reach new people in your community is social media. I don't think you can make broadly a good argument for any other option when it comes to cost, likelihood, and sure, there are individual churches that might have better options for those individual churches. But if you said, okay, 300,000 churches in America, what is the best option for the average church? It's still got to be social.
And it's so funny because we've been saying this for, 10 years? And it's more true now than it ever has been. Like when I first joined the podcast, we were talking about this a lot, but in the context of like Facebook ads, like paid promotion on Facebook and such. But now it's just like, because of this discovery era in the algorithm, like you don't have to pay for it anymore. In fact, it's better to not pay for it anymore. The opportunity to reach folks in your area with the message of Jesus on social media has never been more ripe than it is now, it's just amazing. And we have spent 10 years learning and practicing, and it's almost like, okay, now we really get, like you just mentioned those 3 testimonies from Jeremy, from Crystal, and from Trey. We've had them all on the show recently. And all of those interviews we did with them, I was so encouraged at the end because, you know, we hit record and we're done talking to them, and I realized, oh, they're doing all this stuff, they're putting it into practice, and it's working. Like when Jeremy told us how many folks come to his church from social media, it was like, I could barely believe it. And he's not making it up. Like, it's true. It's working. He's just doing the work. He's posting on social. He's posting on social. He's posting on social. And folks not only are just hearing the good news of Jesus, which is great. And truthfully, in a lot of cases, that's good enough. But it's local people who are hearing the good news and coming to church and becoming integrated members of local Christian communities because they first heard that story being told through that social media avenue, through that church. Like, I feel like I'm a cynical person by nature. It's very hard to make me excitable. And this makes me really excited that you can do this for free, in a lot of cases, very low effort on social media. But by using intentional strategy, but pretty low effort. And you can have real measurable impact on the lives of real people in your local community. Thanks to these tools that are not neutral, right? Like it takes real wisdom to engage with these devices and the networks behind these devices, the algorithms that power these devices. It takes real wisdom to do it in a way that enables you to walk in health while you do it. You and I work on social media for a living, and so we're like in the trenches. We know what it's like to have to put these things into practice so that at the end of the day, like our souls are not in deep despair. Like we know what it's like. But I guess what we're trying to say is we think it's possible, and not only possible, we really do think it's worth it for your church.
To the boosting point, I got a DM 3 hours ago. This is from a pastor, and they said, hey, we had another reel pop today, less than 12 hours, and it's 5 times the reach of our total likes and followers. And the hook is, avoid this mistake in your prayer life. I'm just really looking at this for the first time.
That's a great hook. I'm curious to know what the mistake is now. They've got me hooked.
Yeah. So it says this is 26 times higher than your other posts within 15 hours of publishing, just looking at the... And so I asked him, I was like, okay, so how long has it been since you had your like last one go off? And he's like, I just went and did a quick check. We've had no reel as big as this one on Facebook. He asks me, should we consider boosting that one or just let it go organically? And I said, I just let it run. When it eventually loses momentum, we're talking weeks at least, then you might consider boosting. And then I was like, this kind of post is exciting because we've been consistent. This is a church we work with, week over week. And so it's great to see one go off. I told him I only have about 5 or so this year myself, and they account for the vast majority of our growth. So if you don't, you don't get those few if you don't keep publishing.
Right.
He's like, exactly. I've seen your stuff in the lead up talking about the social ministry mountain concept. And we did a post about that today. And the social ministry mountain is this framework for contextualizing how we take what we're doing online and show how it affects in person. And the first level of that mountain, which is 4 levels, and you have to kind of climb scale each level in consecutive order to get to the top, which is the summit, crossover events where you see these events happening. The first step is no weeks off. And it's really counterintuitive in some senses because only a small handful of posts that you publish in an entire year in the world of discovery algorithms will contribute to growth. So we've doubled on Instagram this year. We've been on Instagram for 10 years at Brady Shear. We've been doing no weeks off for 10 years. Before discovery algorithms, what we were doing was we just kept reaching our existing audience, and we would bring in people. We'd cross-promote from YouTube, where we were having organic growth for the longest time. But Instagram wasn't made for that. TikTok changes everything. Discovery algorithms come in. We start publishing reels. We've had 3 or 4 reels do really well. And we've grown.
Hold on, say that again. 3 or 4. That's less than one handful, and we're posting multiple times a week.
Yeah.
So you're getting 100 shots.
We've done 200 posts this year.
Yeah.
So 1 to 2% of the posts. And you can go to our reels and like filter by most popular. So we had one church welcome videos, which was talking about Trey's church. We did one, what people will never tell you about big churches. And we did one, best church logos you've never seen, part 2. No one likes part 1 of it, apparently. So those are like the 3 biggest from this year. All 500,000 views roughly, which is still small compared to like Crystal. 20 million people saw this one. Doubled our followers for the year. In the church social media space, which is incredibly small relative to, the Lord. And we had been on here for 10 years, so we weren't a new account. Sometimes we start working with a church, they've never really taken things seriously. And so they see things go well right away for them. No, we had been, that's my job for 10 years. And it was just a few posts that did it all. So that's kind of the paradox where it's like, well, if it's just a few posts, why do I need to publish so often? Because you never know which post is going to be the one that does it. You earn those posts by doing 200 good ones. I'm proud of all the ones that pop off. You're always like, why that one?
Sure. Why number 2 and not number 1?
Yeah, like some of the recent ones have been performing not as well as I would expect. And I'm like, come on, man. I really like those ones. But that's just the game that you play.
Now, we've said this before and recently on the show, all of those other, those 196 other posts, they serve a purpose as well. They are serving first and foremost, your existing audience, however many followers you have on Instagram now. What do you have, 100,000?
No. We're at 85.
Okay.
We've just been kind of, I'm waiting for another one to go up.
Yeah.
I had a goal for 100 by the end of the year, which, by the way, never set yourself numbers goals. I do it every year, but every year I know it's not something I can control. It's more just like, hey, I know that a certain amount of effort needs to go in for this to be possible. If it doesn't happen, so be it, because I can't control it fully. I can only control publishing. I can control input. I can't necessarily control output. But we were on pace, and now we're a bit behind pace. And I was like,
you need to squeeze out one more viral post.
Well, that's why I keep churches hate him,
No, but that's why those viral posts serve to build your audience in a really effective way, thanks to discovery algorithms. And then all those other 195 other posts serve the audience that follows you. You will have folks who don't follow you who watch those posts, and of course it's not a rule there, but those posts serve to go deep with the folks who show up for you every day. But you're going to have a handful of posts that go wide and reach a wide audience and continue to build your audience. And for the churches who are listening, you can hear how this is relevant to what you're doing as a church. We have the greatest story ever told. It is worth showing up every week and posting about the story, even if it's just your church that hears it. But if you show up and take no weeks off, you keep showing up, you follow a social sermon formula, and you're posting good videos with good hooks, you're going to have some posts that go off that reach thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, in some cases, millions of people with the story of Jesus, which is enough, but they will also probably follow along with you. And surely some of those folks will be local. They'll become ingrained in your local community. And you can see how this stuff matters. It really does matter.
So we call that the fallback, which is like, hey, if nothing else, you're going to be reminding your church of the goodness of God, the promises of God. And I'm just looking at the insights here, because we basically are publishing two types of content right now. We're publishing reels and we're publishing carousels. And our carousels are kind of only reaching our existing audience. And then our reels are the ones that give us a chance at reaching a wide audience. And so we're purposely creating content that serves both.
Right.
Kind of leaning into the reality of distribution on Instagram, because both are great. And this is why we love social relative to traditional media. If you do mailers, you leave the mailer there at my neighbor's house. And if they don't respond to that mailer, no one in your church benefits from that. You share the good news, someone in your local area sees it, and while you're picking up their groceries, like, hey, that guy's a pastor. Or while you're getting your adjustments, like, hey, your husband's a pastor. If that didn't happen, you'd still be sharing the good news with your church. Okay, we've talked about kind of the pushback we're seeing right now society-wide, which is a good thing. Hey, we indiscriminately embrace social and digital media. Maybe that was a bad thing. I don't want us to overcorrect. I think that posture will be unhelpful for the mission of our churches, which is why I talked about why I'm bullish on social. But let's now get to the meat of this, which is rules for digital hygiene, which is more important now than ever. That's probably not true. It's probably always been important. We just apparently didn't want to talk about it or weren't aware of it as much, because the biggest communication shift in 500 years, there are a couple of variables that must exist for that to be true. One, it has to be very disruptive to culture. Secondly, it needs to happen really fast. And that's the element of this biggest communication shift that we typically overlook. We realize, it's affecting everything, but we don't realize how much velocity and inertia there's been behind it. It happened so quickly. And when things happen that quickly, we didn't really have an opportunity as a culture to be like, hey, how do we implement? And we're just seeing it now generationally. You talked about it with this friend of yours. We're seeing that now more than ever. There was a little bit where parents just gave their kids phones because they didn't want their kids to be left out, because they weren't really aware of the negative consequences. And now we have, a generation worth of data. And now the medical community, again, is like, hey, maybe we should delay this for these reasons because we have data on it. Oh, okay, now we're comfortable doing that. So we're kind of catching up. 3 rules for digital hygiene. The first is these are less like prescriptive rules and more basically like rules for understanding the force that is digital media. And then you can prescribe any number of different practices from these rules.
Right.
So the first is what we've said already: indiscriminate use of digital media will be harmful. So the prescription that would come out of that is, are you using digital media mindlessly? Are you able to articulate rules, boundaries that you have for yourself that you use in digital? If not, that is indiscriminate use. What might a rule look like? Oh, you know what? I'm Alexander Mills. I'm Portobello Priest. And I do not have phones in my bedroom. Great. That's a boundary that he is putting in his own life. I, Saint Shroom, do not allow notifications on my phone. This is you again.
That's me. Yeah.
That's a boundary. Okay? Those are intentional things that he's doing as a response to the recognition that indiscriminate use of digital media will be harmful.
But that's not prescriptive for everyone. I'm so glad you said that, because a few episodes ago, I told a story without naming someone about someone who no longer uses TikTok, and I'm fine to out her now, because now I'm going to celebrate her for her. It's my wife. And
oh no, really?
And she's a perfect example of this. Like, she realized in her own heart, like monitoring her anxiety level, she's like, I can't be on TikTok.
Sister Shroom.
Yeah, there's just too much stuff on here that I don't want to see. The algorithm wants me to see it because it's fueled on rage and fear, and it's just not good for her. So she got off TikTok. I'm so proud of her. We didn't even talk about it. She just told me one day, she's like, I'm done. It's been a full handful of months, and she's like,
she didn't do the 14-day fast and then fall off the wagon.
She's like, I feel so much healthier and happier, and she's got no plan to go back. And so to this, that is not prescriptive for everyone. We have whole strategies on how your church should be using TikTok. We endorse using TikTok, but not mindlessly.
And personal and professional use are also very different, which is worth mentioning.
And so for Rebecca, she came to a point where she had to be super. It was indiscriminate use, and she had to become very mindful of it and realize, okay, I got to make a change here. And for her, that's looked like health. And so this is not a prescription in the sense that like me, your phone should be on Do Not Disturb all the time, or like Rebecca, you shouldn't have TikTok. But we have to be mindful of these things.
That's a great example of a different type of rule that would be informed by this rule of digital hygiene. Indiscriminate use will be harmful. Maybe for you, that might mean X platform, maybe X.
Yes.
You know what? X might be harmful for all of us. X platform is one that I can't engage in, right? It's like, maybe this isn't a perfect analogy, but like some people can have a drink of alcohol and not have any issue. Like, I don't have any history of alcohol abuse in like my immediate family. I've never seen it up close in a negative way. I've only seen it in a healthy way. Like, Dad would have one beer when we'd watch the Raptors game at night once a week. So when I have a drink, to me, it's like this is a great thing. Yeah. Other people have to stay away from it because either molecularly or just from history and family tradition, it is extremely unhealthy for them. So that's like a rule where, like, we've done this as Christians, it's not useful to prescribe one thing for everyone. Feel like maybe the early Christians talked about that. Feel like there's something in there. This
might have been talked about before. We might have a resource for this.
But you as an individual have to figure out what's right for you. Another example of that might be, okay, I'm on all the platforms, but there are certain types of creators that I just don't want to follow. So for example, I was opening TikTok today because I use TikTok more professionally than personally. Lately anyway. And I looked at like the stories icons at the top of my TikTok, and it was all shirtless dudes with huge muscles. And I was like, that's actually not reflective of my TikTok feed right now. But I must follow a bunch of fitness influencers that are dudes. And of course, what do you do if you're a fitness influencer? Like, your avatar needs to be you with, you know, your bulging muscles and really great lighting with a huge pump. Be like, look at me, I'm huge. Now you can trust what I have to say. And I had a reflection in that moment earlier today. I was like, I wonder how this might be warping my perspective of how I see myself in the mirror. And I kind of just let that thought go, but I'm using it as an example of like, maybe I come to the point where I'm like, actually, those people are in like teaching me useful things, but maybe I've learned all the useful things I need from them. And maybe seeing that, and this goes back to a previous episode we did, frequency illusion, maybe seeing this much is warping my perspective on what's actually normal. I should not follow those type of people. And this could be an expression in any type of thing. Like, even something that's good can go too far. Perhaps you follow Clean Talk, which is all about like how to keep your house neat. Like, here's how I get it. But then you become like unhealthily obsessed with a clean home, and you're about to have a second kid, and you're like, that's not realistic. And now you're unhappy because what you want and what you have the gap is widening, and usually the wider that gap is, the more unhappy you are, the more discontent you are. So you need to actively play a role in removing those things.
Yep.
Second rule for digital hygiene. If you don't make conscious decisions, they will be made for you. And this is, of course, relative to the discovery algorithm and how it is going to use your viewing habits and your personal interests to show you things that it is convinced that you like. Now, let's talk about a positive example of this. I have multiple types of music that I listen to on Spotify. They have made some type of algorithmic change in the past year where they are smart enough to know what mood, or in this case, what family member is in the car and what to play
No way.
afterwards. Here's what I mean by that. So they've introduced all these like smart things that I don't use. But sometimes what it will do is if you've listened to a single, so this morning we're on the way to school and Lil says, I want to hear praise. Praise the Lord. Oh My Soul by Elevation. Never heard of it.
Not familiar with it.
What?
Serious.
It's like the number one song right now.
I don't.
It's Elevation, Brandon Lake, and Chandler Moore. It's like when Khaled gets everyone together. And it's like, it was Bieber and Chance and Quavo
I don't spend too much time listening
and Wheezy.
to the top of the Christian charts.
Okay, this song is a bop.
Okay.
And it will make you want to praise the Lord.
Okay.
Now, there is a questionable lyric. Okay, this is not the point of this. Okay.
But this might be the most important thing we talk about.
So yeah, there's this questionable lyric in the first verse. This is a praise song, okay? It is exciting. It is high energy. It is, hey, no matter what's happening, look to God and give him praise.
It's Elevation.
Okay, it's a praise song, okay? Not a slow song.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes the critique on Christian music, worship music, is it's not biblically based, right? Hey, there's no lament. There's no, ecclesiastic-y type of things. It's always like positive, but there's a lot of negative, like in the Psalms. I think they took it too far. In the first verse, there's a line that says, praise is the water my enemies drown in.
Yikes.
Which I think is, it's just totally, thematically, incongruent with the rest of the song.
Yeah, they really went for it there, hey?
And they sing it very cheerfully. Praise is the water everyone's dying in. Like, it's just, it's a lot.
Yeah.
That was a little bit of a paraphrase, but
That is a lot.
yeah. Anyway.
Okay, so you're listening to this song.
I listened to this song.
Lil is shouting it on our way to school.
And
like, my enemies are drowning in this water, thanks be to God.
Yeah, she's like those fourth graders.
Yeah, Tommy on the monkey bars, he's
Johnny. Johnny is
he's going down
the problem.
today. Okay.
Tommy was the bully when I was a child, so. Okay. Every time we listen to this song, I choose it as a single. So Spotify has to determine what song comes after.
Right.
And every time we listen, the song immediately after is Altar by Forrest Frank.
Okay. Classic.
And it happens every time. And I tested it this morning, driving home from school, where I was like, Pavlovian was like, this song ends. Now I get to listen to Altar. It's not a playlist. It's determining that because, you're going to listen to the Jesus music now? You're off of For All the Dogs by Drake? You're okay? You're in this mood. Okay, we're not going to then play Try It Our Best from Drake's new album. We're going to keep you in this kind of mood. You're in this genre right now. Those are discovery algorithms. I'm not even making that conscious decision. It's being made for me, and I'm letting it happen because, now I'm being trained.
Right.
It can work in the negative. You can expect something, and it's training you towards things that you don't want. If you don't make conscious decisions, they will be made for you.
Yeah, that is, geez. There's a lot to ponder
Praise
about that.
is the water.
That is such a perfect example. And I'm glad you started with a positive example of it because, again, my cynical bent, and this is what Rebecca was going through with TikTok, was like, it was showing her stuff that she didn't want to see. And not, it wasn't like, at the risk of talking about, it's just like stuff that's going on in the real world, like real events that just like as a woman, as a mother, like it was just too much. Her heart couldn't handle it.
Yep.
And it's really easy if you're not intentional or if you're not mindful or if you just don't know. Like it's probably just ignorance for a lot of folks about how the algorithms work and how they serve you content based off your behavior. You and I know this because we work in this arena. But a lot of folks, just ignorance is bliss. They just don't know. And And based on how you interact with content or don't interact with content, based on how you make use of that not interested button on TikTok, the algorithm is going to serve you content that it thinks can get you to watch it for the full length of the video. So whether that's, if you're on my TikTok feed, whether that's like a hunting video or like a foraging video that like, wow, that mushroom is cool, I'm going to watch this whole thing. Or if you're like...
Your TikTok is actually Shroom Talk?
Yeah, there's a guy in Burlington called Jeremy from Ontario. Hi, it's Jeremy from Ontario Wild Mushrooms. I think that's what it's called. And yeah, just lots of.
Did you discover him on TikTok?
Yeah.
So you didn't know. So in the Ontario mushroom foraging community, you didn't even know this guy.
So now, because I'm a junior forager, so now he is always posting what mushrooms are currently ripen in season. We live in the same area. TikTok knows this. They serve me his mushroom content because we're in the same locale. Yeah. Now I never have to go to Google to search like when are chanterelles like popping off. Like
this is a positive.
I don't follow him. I never use the following page on TikTok. I'm always on the For You page. And he's like, chanterelles are popping off this week. I'm like, sweet, thanks, Jer. And I'm in the forest finding chanterelles. So again, positive because I'm interacting with his content. I'm either like saving them for later, or surely I'm watching them all the way through.
Yeah.
But if something comes across my feed that I don't want to see, if I'm not like either swiping past it or using that not interested feature, like those decisions are going to keep being made for me because I'm mindlessly interacting with that stuff.
Look, I apologize for having this elevation lyric discussion like 4 months after everyone else did. Like I know that this has been debated and like probably adjourned in like the public Christian.
That's funny because this is the first time I'm hearing about it.
You don't even know the song
on Twitter. Like I'm pretty plugged into like the current Christian, conversation at least. But yeah, this didn't come across my feed at all.
Rule for digital hygiene number 3: if you are not paying for the product, you are the product. Again, an important reminder. We forget this because we see ads, but the way that platforms make their most money is the data mining that they're doing with you and with me. And what have we begun to see over the past decade? Well, more progressive nations, European nations, Californian states have been like, hey, we are going to implement these new privacy laws. And they're clunky and they basically ruin the internet because now I have to care about cookies on every single page and every page has 4 pop-ups, which, yes, maybe my privacy is being cared for a little bit more, but now I have to like click out of 2 pop-ups every time I visit a website. Like, is that the trade-off that we wanted to make as a society? Seems like no. But those are countries that were basically like, okay, this is not as it should be. This tech evolved way too fast. It's way too invasive. We need to stop it. And the solutions are unpolished. The solutions are inelegant, but they're a step in the right direction, if not properly executed. And we're going to continue to make better choices because we're not indefinitely going to be comfortable giving big tech companies all of this very sensitive information. But it came along so fast, and we were from a generation where our parents were like my mom wouldn't let me put the credit card on anywhere but Amazon for like 5 years. She's like, it could get stolen. I was like, Mom, you can just buy anything online anytime. It's fine. Like if something happens, you just call the credit card companies, they give it back in a second and you're fine. You issued a new card. She's like, no. Like it's bad. And what, son, like, aren't you worried about your data? I'm like, no, the internet's awesome. They can have all my data no matter what, as long as I get to keep staying on the platforms. And eventually, we've reached more of a healthy middle ground. But this is similar to those other 2 rules for digital hygiene, an important reminder. And from it, you are allowed to basically prescribe anything for yourself that's rooted in that, whatever that might make sense for you.
It's curious to me that all 3 of these points we're talking about for rules for navigating digital media with hygiene that promotes health, like all 3 of these have this ignorance element to them, which is to nobody's fault. But like, I'm constantly surprised by how many folks I'm talking to about folks who don't work in digital media, right? Like just regular people, and their comments about these platforms and how they work, algorithms. Or just recently, I saw someone on Facebook here in Canada talking about they were trying to post a news article on Facebook and it wouldn't work, and they're like, "See, we're being censored," and it's just like, okay, so you don't, like, there is a thing going on here that you don't know about, and so you're drawing a wrong conclusion.
Right.
And that happens a lot with these social platforms too, which is like, especially for the third one, like folks don't understand that yes, these platforms are free. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, X, TikTok, YouTube, free to use, but that's because the transaction is happening with what we're giving them, which is data based off of our account data, our behavior, our interest from other websites that have cookies. Like, so many folks don't know this, and it's allowing them to draw wrong conclusions about how the platforms work and how they don't work. And I don't think it's enough to withdraw from these platforms, the free platforms, because we are the product. I don't think that's a conclusion we should make. I think the conclusion we should make, and to summarize what we're talking about here, is that at least to be aware of it, mindful of it, so that going forward we are operating with this understanding that, like, okay, there is a transaction going on here. For me to be on these platforms for free necessitates a transaction, and just being mindful of that really informs how we move through these platforms, how we interact with them, how we engage with certain posts, what we select when the do you want to accept all cookies pops up. Like, it informs how we interact with those pop-ups. And for me, at least in the last 5 years, like, just learning about this stuff and growing out of some measure of ignorance in some of these ways. The scriptures came to mind, like, be not ignorant of the enemy's devices. like I'm just becoming a little bit more aware about how these things work online. We're all going through this right now. It has enabled me to make changes in my behavior online that have really proved to be more healthy for me in my personal life and my work life. Like, I'm on the computer all day for work, and it requires certain measures of digital hygiene to be okay when I go home, and yeah, just learning a little bit about how these things work has really helped me do that.
We don't have all the answers for sure, which is why, again, none of this is prescriptive. Mm-hmm. We're still kind of figuring this out, but these 3 principles should be useful kind of guideposts out in this wilderness of digital media. We'll recap them one more time. Number 1, indiscriminate use of digital media will be harmful. Number 2, if you don't make conscious decisions, they will be made for you. And number 3, if you're not paying for the product, you are the product. We're open, of course, to hearing your thoughts. You can send us a text. You can shoot us an email, hello@prochurchtools.com. And thanks, as always, for your time, attention, and trust. We'll talk to you next week.
See, the folks who sing that lyric and are like stoked on it are the people who read the story about the demons getting cast into the pigs and then the pigs running off the cliff. Mm-hmm. And they're not mindful of, like, the poor farmer who just lost his whole pig flock. You know what I mean? It's like, well, what about that guy? Like, his pigs just all unalive themselves.
Yeah.
It's sad stuff.